Just show up and work the best you can wherever you're at. And as you're doing that, get to know yourself better. What are your skills? What are you good at? What are you interested in? And see what career paths choices you can make to pivot more and more into those things. Scaling your company double every 6 months or whatever it might be, like some service businesses literally can, which in some ways like super impressive. But if you're doing that, the odds are you're not able to keep up with things like process growth. That's a particular challenge, I think, of that is needing to build for right now, but also be open to change and adaptation.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Kirk Williams, the founder and owner of Zato. Kirk's a true veteran in the advertising game, having been knee-deep in it since 2009. He's built Zato into a micro-agency laser-focused on Google and Microsoft advertising, and his expertise hasn't gone unnoticed. In fact, he was recognized as the third most influential PPC expert in the world by PPC Survey just this year. You might also know him for his insightful TEDx talk on redefining business success, where he challenged the idea that success is just about money. Kirk's a prolific writer, sharing his PPC wisdom across industry giants like Shopify, Microsoft, and Moz. And he's an international conference speaker, having shared stages in London, Sydney, and countless other cities. He even penned 3 books on PPC marketing and agency ownership. When he's not teaching or writing, you can find him in Billings, Montana with his wife, 6 kids, and a serious collection of Star Wars Lego sets. Get ready to deep dive into the world of paid search with one of the best. So, Kirk, I want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's good to be here. Yeah, looking forward to chatting.
Awesome. So I'd like you to tell people a little bit about what you do. What's your ninja skill? That one thing you're really good at that you just love doing and that you've built a business around.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll start with the super niche and then, move more general. I really like Google Shopping ads, which probably, a lot of your listeners have never heard of, which is fine. We can go into that if you want. But man, I started back before there were shopping ads, actually advertising on Google Ads, kind of fell into love with it. There's just certain ways that Google works, especially around a keyword-based system where someone's saying, this is what I'm interested in. And I just found, hey, being able to match your product or service you're selling with what someone is interested in is really cool. Like, it's a really great specific advertising style. Kind of fell in love with it, got into that more, and then specifically Google Shopping, did that alone, and then eventually hired a few people, and now have what I call a micro agency. Just kind of, there's 6 of us. We stay in our lane with Google and Microsoft ads. Just kind of the search ads, search network, YouTube is in there as well. People ask us all the time, like, are you expanding into social media, Facebook, things like that? And I'm like, not really. I'm just going to, stay with what we know, go deep into that, try to provide a great workplace for myself and my employees and do our thing. So
I think a lot of people have seen Google Ads and they don't quite understand what it is, especially if you're not a business person, you haven't purchased pay-per-click or business ads yet. So give us a little overview. What's the difference? What are they? Just give us a little bit of an overview of what they are.
Sure. So Google Ads, like everything else right now, is changing a lot. And so there's some level where the answer to this, 5 years ago would be different than what it is now. What I'll do is more of the general kind of what everyone knows of Google as it is, right? So Google, different than, let's say, social media type advertising area. Google is a little bit more in the demand capture side rather than creating and generating demand. What that means is, in order for someone to search for your product, this is the oversimplified way of explaining it, but in order for someone to search for your product, they have to have like some existing knowledge of that, right? Mm-hmm. You can't formulate words unless you know what you're thinking of. And so in a lot of ways, like that's maybe the core thing is it's very different. What you're doing is seeing, hey, people are interested. They're actively searching for this. Let's be in front of those people. That tends to be very, very different than, let's say, a Meta, Facebook, billboards, whatever it might be, where you're trying more to generate demand, which is someone driving down the street, they look up a billboard, they see, whatever it is, the purse that they've always wanted to buy, and they're like, oh, hey, you know what? Wasn't thinking about this, but now I should buy that purse, right? Then later they go home and they Google that purse, and then up pops an ad. So that's kind of how it tends to work in the funnel. It's way more complex than that, because as customer journeys are not all linear, but like that's kind of the simplified way of saying where Google fits into that.
Exactly. And I think that we've all seen Google Ads. I don't think there is a person who has been on the internet for any amount of time who has not seen one of these pay-per-click ads, so little things that show up on the side and search engines, stuff like that. But I think we don't think about it. It's one of those things like we just don't think about these type of advertising and how it works and how it builds into our business.
Well, it's also funny because, I've never met anyone who's clicked on a Google ad. That's obviously a joke, and yet Google's a $1 trillion business, and that's driven by ads. So it's also one of those things where a lot of people, it is interesting. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't like those ads, but Google's making a lot of money out of them. So lots of people are finding value in them. And I'm a huge believer, like advertising and marketing has often had sometimes fairly a dark side to it in terms of people not liking it, right? It's kind of like, these ads are interruptive. And like, first of all, I agree. I hate mid-roll ads where you're watching your little video and it pops up in front of you and interrupts it. That's fair. But I think like advertising in its, let's call it purest sense, is actually a really good thing for a marketplace and for people, because if done correctly, all you're doing is finding an existing interest or need and like meeting that need. And so I like, that's where to me it's helpful to see there are absolutely ways of getting your product or service in front of the right people is actually really helpful to them. And that's what we strive to do.
Now, how did you get into this? What was the sequence of events that caused you to get into pay-per-click marketing?
So I was in seminary training to be a pastor.
Oh, nice.
And I was working overnights at a big box store, and I was the guy pulling the boxes off the shelves in the back and restocking the shelves. And I would basically work all night, get in, sleep for like an hour. Like we joke, my wife and I would high five on the way as she headed to work. And I'd somehow get class in there, somehow sleep. I've thought about back to that time. I'm like, I honestly don't really remember what the schedule was and how we survived. But it was like 3 months, so clearly we didn't survive very long. And I just remember being like, I will take whatever the next job that I can possibly get, that comes along, because I can't do this. So I backed away from school, slowed down on my classes. And I had a friend who's in marketing. He's like, hey, do you want to do marketing? I was like, I've never done marketing, but okay, sure, whatever. It's a job. And like one of those, got into it. And I was doing content stuff where I was basically taking, it was like super interesting stuff. I was taking like parts manufacturer notebooks and literally typing what they said into the online store. So, but back in the days, it's kind of like hey, we need to list this product. Okay, like type that in, right? And eventually, like our owner of this small e-com store was like, hey, would you be interested in trying this Google Ads thing? It's newer. And I was like, sure. And got into it, self-trained and learned from there. And yeah, kind of the rest is history. Eventually went out on my own and grew this thing.
I think that's interesting that sometimes just that necessity of, I just need a job somewhere. I mean, this is how I started in the learning industry. I had kind of had an idea about it, but it's, I moved back to Buffalo and was looking for my future previous employer, just something to get a job right now. And I ended up in the learning industry, and 20 years later, we're here. So it's really interesting to kind of hear how sometimes just being in the right place, going, I need to find something, and it turns into a career.
And I am super thankful, and I feel very privileged, because I don't think everyone does. A lot of people are in that position and like they don't find the thing they love. So I'm also really thankful for that. Like I didn't intend to stumble into something that I'm like, hey, I think I'm good at this and I like it. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a friend of mine in business the other day, going through something similar, where it's like you're going to have to pivot. There should be no kind of sacred cows as far as business is concerned, because sometimes you're going to have to leave your business, and that first one's always really difficult to do. But then again, there's also some really cool stuff out there that you might not be aware of that might be, another really cool thing you can get into. And I think that's something that we forget about in business, especially people just starting off. It's really hard for them to give up that first business, but there might be something really cool coming up later on, where this phase is ended. There's cycles in life, and sometimes the cycle comes to an end and you move on to something else. So yeah. Yeah, I feel like in employee, I don't know, law is not the right word, just some sort of like the employee culture. There's like two extremes. Sometimes there's the mindset where it's just kind of like, hey, what you enjoy and your passion doesn't matter really at all. Just like get in there and make some money and save for retirement and, do your thing. And then there's almost the other extreme where it's like, never stop until you find the thing that you absolutely love. And that's what you want to do every day. And of course, what happens, especially you talk to people who find that and they're like, hey, I used to really love this. Now that I do this every day, I don't love it as much. Right. I just really think there's some level of balance in the middle where like, yeah, just show up and work the best you can wherever you're at. And as you're doing that, get to know yourself better. What are your skills? What are you good at? What are you interested in? And see what career choices you can make to pivot more and more into those things, right? Into what I'm good at and what I enjoy. I mean, if you're good at managing people and not good at spreadsheets, try to work your way towards those sort of things and not into, like if you're terrible at math, don't become an engineer, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think there's certain things like that where sometimes, yeah, there is that balance in the middle, but also I think you can purposely work towards stuff you enjoy. Absolutely. So I want to go into a little bit about kind of what you do and what your company has done. And the first thing I want to ask is that, you're recognized as top 25 most influential PPC experts. What do you think sets apart PPC experts who build a long-term authority in the space versus just those that kind of ride trends or we do these things and the next time the first Google slap comes up, now we have something now that they're kind of stuck in the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's three things. I think they actually do have to know their stuff. I do like, I've actually heard criticisms at times of people who are, a little bitter. Maybe they didn't make it on the list or something like that. And sometimes there's a little bit of a criticism about, whether or not they're true experts. I think for the most part, someone who has been recognized for years, there is some level where the knowledge that they have contributed is there. It has been helpful. It's been filtered through a number of people. They wouldn't be as popular if there wasn't some value they're actually contributing. So I think that's one of those things. Second thing is I think they're actually good at communicating that knowledge. And not necessarily good right from the beginning. Like a lot of us are kind of figuring that out. And I think that that's just something over time you learn how to communicate better, right? Whatever it might be. And then like the third thing is I think they actually like they actually carve out that time and communicate it. But I don't know. There's like the people that I know, I tend to rub shoulders a lot with a lot of those people on the list, things like that, just because a lot of times we're the ones going to, let's say, a PPC conference to speak, right? And there really is just this interesting, like they tend to be, fun, interesting people who know their stuff, who are curious, who love to share that knowledge. And I think that's just part of it is over time, like there is a reason that those people tend to be, known more. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. Now, when I was reading through your bio, one of the things you said is that Zato Marketing is designed to be a thought partner versus just another PPC vendor. And I think PPC has been around for a long time. And I think people are used to everyone kind of doing PPC. What sets you apart kind of as a thinking partner versus just a standard vendor?
Yeah. I think that a big part of that has been the way I've been purposefully trying to build our agency. Which is, I actually have this on our website, like we're about your growth, not our own. And what's tricky is that, a lot of people will say stuff like that. And at some point it's hard to be like, no, I actually mean it. And some of that is like, I've put my money where my mouth is. And so, I alluded to earlier, like we haven't grown into other things and social, that sort of thing. There have been opportunities, all that. I just think there's some level where I really want to be really good at Google Ads, and I want my team to be really good at Google Ads, and I want us to be able to help our clients not just simply because we're getting another client and we can make a little cash, but so that we can actually know this platform deeply and then do really well with that and then foster a long-term relationship. Because for me, there's much more of a benefit in existing with a partner, with a client for years than there is kind of a little bit of the normal churn and burn that you see with agencies a lot, where it's a little bit more, their objective is more like, we want our sales to outpace our churn. And mine is more like, I know this isn't realistic, but I'd love if I've never had to do sales ever again in my life. Like, I don't mind sales. It's just like, man, I love like stability and I love clients that we work with. We had this client where we were the not just the partner's employees, as well as part of that, like we'd been with them the longest. So there were times where their team was asking us about their own internal business things because we knew that because our team had been on it for years. Right. And I just think there's benefit to all parties with that, with that sort of thing. And so I think that's a big part of it. And so some of how that actually specifically works into how, I run the business is that's very different as well, would be things like agencies are very well known for burning out their employees as well. So you often have a lot of employee churn, you often have a lot of client churn. And again, a lot of times it's not always, but a lot of times that is because of aggressive scaling. So in some ways, even if a lot of agencies begin at a place where they are very good quality of work, you'll hear this often from early clients of agencies that have grown really fast. Is they'll say something like, man, back in the old days, we really loved they did a great job. And then we just kept getting these new people and they didn't really know their stuff as well. And eventually the service quality dipped. And so that's why we're talking to you now, Kirk. Mm-hmm. And like we hear that a lot. And I think in some ways that's almost unavoidable. Like if you're scaling your company double every 6 months or whatever it might be, like some service businesses literally can, which in some ways like super impressive. But if you're doing that, the odds are you're not able to keep up with things like process growth. The process for 6 people as opposed to 60 is going to be incredibly different. And I mean, just the process of like, how should we manage this type of account or what is the process for XYZ problem, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing how to disseminate that when you are onboarding that many employees is just difficult. So I think there's lots of reasons why scaling itself, while not always bad, can actually, be harmful to clients and employees, and it gets stressful. You hear that a lot. And so a lot of what I've tried to do is just like, hey, I just like I want clients to hang around a long time, I want my employees to hang around a long time. So we really try to find client partners that are going to fit with our objectives and culture, which would tend to be like more of a low stress, low drama sort of environment. So that, like, as I like to say, I'm not my employees' family, their families are. And so I want to let them go home at the end of the day to their family and their weekend. And other than rare times, I want them to be able to just not have to think about work. Like that's the business owner's job, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think like those sort of things are a big part of where, like, yeah, we actually want to know our stuff, and we want to have in some ways the emotional bandwidth to be able to service things well and just like have a great time doing it. So yeah, I think that's where we are. I'm really happy with where we are. So.
Yeah. And I think that's something that every company goes through is when you first start off, it's either you or a very small number of folks. And, your job titles are yes, all the things. Exactly. Throw in, deal with it, and go. As the company scales, that becomes more and more difficult. And I think that no matter how good your processes are, how good of a manager or how good of a leader you are, what sort of a team you have, there's always that part where you're not quite systematized. You've got the systems, but people don't quite know what they are yet, or they don't know, who to go to for a question, and mm-hmm. you start getting actual titles versus yes, or chief everything officer, stuff like that. And I think I've seen this, I've helped build 2 7-figure companies. And that's one of the biggest struggles that we had was no matter how good you were, there's that transition, and it's always hard for everyone. And because with a system that kind of that's there, but doesn't work really well, you're at this, you end up, what you need to do, but everyone's sort of adjusting, and then maybe communication breaks down, or maybe something else happens. And so I've definitely seen that with a lot of companies, and it's been very, very difficult. And so thankfully, I mean, you it sounds like you kind of knew this was going to happen, saw it, and then was able to adjust. And that's something I think a lot of people don't do well. So congrats to you on that.
Yeah. No, thanks. I mean, a lot of it has been learning. Some of it's been luck, like everyone else. Kind of wondering, COVID era, are we gonna not survive? Things like that. And then there's just been like practical things involved with that too. I mean, so one of the things I've always been, again, some of this is like personality. I'm just not going to be the personality where I could walk in. So I live in Billings, Montana. I could walk in and be like, I think I could start a restaurant here, open up a thing, take millions of dollars of credit, and just kind of like pray that it's going to go well. Man, I maybe have a little bit of a lower risk. So some of that would be things like having cash in the bank for hard times is important to me. Some people disagree with that in terms, I mean, people always like that idea, but what I mean is, a lot of people are like, well, invest it back in the business. So, but what I found is there are times, especially for the end of 2023, a lot of agencies were struggling big time. And there are some reasons for that, especially e-com. You kind of had the post-COVID, all of a sudden bump that really went high for e-com. And so then basically everyone, even though they tried not to, we're just like, whoa, this is the new normal. Everyone overhired, everyone over whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, stuff started to renormalize. So a lot of clients left agencies. A lot of agencies, almost like privately, were suffering big time. Some closed down, laid off a lot of people. We lost like 40% of our monthly recurring revenue in 30 days during that time. And like, we were fine. We didn't have to lay anyone off. We had some direct conversations with the team. That was one of the times where I'm like, hey, just, like, here's where we're at. We have some time. We have cash in the bank, but like, let's make sure we're serious about sales, and let's be on a little bit of our A game on the marketing side and things like that. And we regained those back, and like we went without laying anyone off, that sort of thing. And not everyone is that fortunate. And, but just as an example of like sometimes practically leaning more into stability in that rather than an aggressive scaling mentality, I think can sometimes have, better things like that. And part of what that's done for me is it's just built trust with our team, as well. So I said, I have 5 employees. There's 6 of us. One person's been with me for 8 years, and then the others have been with me for 4, or 3. And then I just hired someone last year. So also there's a fair amount of trust and stability there, which just as we work better as a team, that's better for our clients too. And I really think a lot of that is kind of based around this whole mentality, which also is what I did my TEDx talk on that we were talking about. So,
nice. So I always like to ask people, experts, what is one thing 5 years ago that you believed about pay-per-click that was not, that turned out to be kind of different, or that you've changed your mind on? So something you believed,
Yeah. I think what I would say is I was way more averse to all of the automation in Google Ads and in the tech world. And in defense of 5 year past Kirk, that's because like it kind of did suck. And we kind of knew it was going to get better. I mean, it just the law of like machine and technology and machine learning and technology and stuff like that is like it will learn and get better. Google was pushing it a little too aggressively 5 years ago, and it wasn't caught up. It really is way better these days. Just more automation, smart bidding, all this stuff really is in a better spot. So I find myself utilizing things like broad match keywords, things like that, more than I would have in the past 5 years, just because it's literally better. So.
And broad match basically meaning it's more of an automated audience where it kind of adjusts based on who's reacting, or there's the weird voodoo magic going on in the background that kind of says, this is where you're at, right?
Yeah, exact match keyword is technically, Google's changed this a lot, is technically if you say, hey, I only want to bid on this phrase. So I have, for those just on audio, I have some Lego Star Wars sets in the background here. I like building Lego Star Wars kits. if I knew exactly the model of this Millennium Falcon that I have, I forget the number, but a lot of times we do search for that exact model because there are those specific ones. Then if you said exactly, I want the 790034 Millennium Falcon, then with Exact Match, you as an advertiser are saying, I only want to bid when someone writes exactly this. And it tends to be more valuable, so you tend to bid higher. Broad Match is more Broad Match is way more, you're giving Google lots of control of saying, hey, whatever you think aligns with these keywords, Google, no matter what, if you think the intent is there, go ahead and bid on that too. And again, in the past, with machine learning not as good, you would have some crazy things that searches that would be matched to those broad match keywords, where now it's way better at saying, oh, we actually do kind of know what you mean with this broad match keyword. And these are the people, even if they're not searching exactly for this, these are the people who align with your interests more. So
I think even 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it? I saw something online. I haven't verified that this was true or not, but I saw something about somebody was searching in Google and said, what's the best way to keep my pizza toppings on my pizza? And Gemini came back with put glue on it. Yeah. I saw the thought process that was there. I was trying to figure out whether or not Gemini was just having some growing pains or Skynet was trying to cull the herd a bit. Wasn't quite sure what was going on there, but it's funny to watch. And like you're saying, so, it kind of used to be okay about it, but now getting a lot better, and you can see that progression. So that totally makes sense. Absolutely, man. Yeah. That's the nature of it. And I mean, I forget, I think it's called Moore's Law, and you can correct me and Google that afterwards, but are you familiar with Moore's Law? Yeah, where everything doubles every 6 months or something. Yeah. So if you think of it like that, then it's all of a sudden like, I mean, it's going to be exponentially smarter in, just 12 months, or, whatever it might be. And so I think that's also just being aware of that. And that's the challenge sometimes with being a Google Ads marketer, is it's always, it's like you have to build your campaigns, and you have to kind of think about managing them around what's happening now and what's actually working, but also with an eye to this is coming. And that's a particular challenge, I think, of that is needing to build for right now, but also be open to change and adaptation. So actually, it's not boring. No, it is not boring. So actually talking about that though, and talking about the future and how things are going to go, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Like, what do you see yourself being known for in 10 years? I don't know. I mean, I hope it's, know, but yeah. Some of why I hesitate is because, I don't even know if Google as it is right now is going to exist in 10 years, right? I mean, there's just a lot of interesting things. I have a lot of faith in trillion-dollar companies not wanting to stop becoming trillion-dollar companies. Yeah. So I kind of think no matter what, I'll be doing something with Google, right? But yeah, I would hope that it'll be some level of Google advertising expert. I have a feeling that a lot of those specifics are going to be changing a lot. So absolutely. I can imagine 10 years, even 2 years from now, things are going to be very, very different than they were. Yeah. I mean, just as an example, like here's an interesting example of, you mentioned Gemini, right? So Gemini is Google's LLM, AI, whatever, someone wants to call it. It's like ChatGPT, right? And so this is what serves those AI overviews that are now in all of the top of your Google search result pages, your SERPs. And one thing that's interesting is here's part of the challenge right now for Google is what that does is that begins to get their answers for people just there in their SERPs, and the people never click off the page. And that's problematic for two reasons. Number one, all of those publishers and the people who are actually building for Google kind of get annoyed if they're never actually getting visited. But the second way is ads, because like Google makes money on Google search. There's other ways Google makes money, YouTube and display and that sort of thing too, Gmail ads. But Google on search makes money by someone clicking through, by someone looking at this ad and clicking through on it. So again, to the point of like, big companies don't like to stop making money. So I really suspect that the entire Google ad ecosystem is about to shift. And I think it's going to shift away from a click-based to more of like an impression-based model, which then actually means Google
Google's highest revenue era could still be well ahead of it, because if they figure out a way to monetize all of the zero-click searches out there, there's like trillions of them that they don't make money off of right now because people don't click through. Yeah. So like there could actually be an argument that Google is going to become significantly larger based on this. I don't know. We'll see. But I do foresee something needing to change as they potentially lose click volume with AI overviews and things like that. So just an example of how, an entire system can change pretty significantly in tech, and we all just kind of figure it out as we go. So,
yeah. Well, it's like you said something earlier where somebody might, see an ad for something, go into their email, then come back to it. You don't quite get that first click attribution for it. Mm-hmm. This might be a workaround for Google, especially with AI. That's going to be a bigger thing now. If I go in and search something on ChatGPT and ChatGPT does a web search, I'm not going to get those ads. I'm not going to be able to click onto them. Now, this might be another way for them to get the ad revenue as well, because it does work. Yeah. There's got to be some basis for it. So, yeah, awesome. Well, Kurt, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. You've dropped a lot of wisdom, and I appreciate you bringing that.
No, yeah, thanks so much. It was fun to chat.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind podcast.